I never imagined that the person I trusted most in my career would become my greatest enemy. When I first met my mentor, he seemed like a beacon of guidance and support, someone who would help me climb the ladder of success. But beneath his reassuring smile hid a shadow I was blind to, a betrayal so deep it threatened to destroy everything I'd worked for. This is the story of how my mentor secretly undermined me at the company, how trust turned to treachery, ambition masked deception, and a fight for survival became a battle to reclaim my life. The moment I stepped into the sleek glass doors of the company headquarters, a surge of hope and excitement coursed through me. This was more than just a new job. It was my shot at a fresh start, a chance to prove myself in an industry I'd dreamed about for years. I was nervous, but eager, like a fledgling ready to take flight. That's when I met him, my mentor. From the very first handshake, he exuded an aura of confidence and warmth. Tall, impeccably dressed, with a disarming smile and eyes that seemed to see right through me, he was everything I wanted in a guide. He welcomed me into the fold with open arms and genuine enthusiasm. "You've got talent," he said, his voice steady but encouraging. "I'll make sure you rise faster than you think." Over the next few weeks, he became my rock in a sea of unfamiliar faces and corporate jargon. He patiently walked me through the company's inner workings, introducing me to key players and teaching me the unspoken rules that textbooks never mention. His office became a sanctuary, a place where my questions were met with thoughtful answers and where I felt, for the first time, truly seen. More than a professional ally, he took on a mentor's role, offering advice that extended beyond work. How to navigate office politics, balance ambition with humility, and even manage stress. His stories of past successes, his words of encouragement, they stirred a fire in me. I began to believe not just in the job, but in myself. Our bond deepened quickly. He invited me to after-hours networking events, introduced me to influential contacts, and subtly positioned me for important projects. Every nod of approval from him felt like a stepping stone, and every praise a validation of my worth. I was on the brink of something extraordinary, and with him by my side, I felt unstoppable. He wasn't just my mentor. He was my champion, my guide through the corporate maze, the father figure I never had in this cutthroat world. In those early days, hope was a bright flame, and I clung to it tightly, unaware that beneath his encouraging smile, a shadow was beginning to stir, one that would soon engulf everything I believed in. At first, the small setbacks were easy to dismiss, almost like innocent mistakes in a bustling company. A key meeting I had prepared for was suddenly canceled without explanation. I was told the project timeline was being adjusted, and while the reason seemed vague, I shrugged it off, trusting that my mentor knew best. After all, he always told me to be patient, that things move slower at the top. But then it happened again. My carefully crafted ideas, which I had shared openly during brainstorming sessions, began to vanish into thin air. Later, I'd overhear passing comments that my suggestions had been appropriated by others in higher positions. Colleagues who once seemed indifferent now suddenly paraded my concepts as their own. When I tentatively asked my mentor about it, his response was a cool smile and a cryptic, "It's the way things work here. Don't take it personally. Focus on the bigger picture." His advice felt increasingly self-serving, like he was steering me toward paths that suited his interests more than mine. I began to notice subtle shifts in his behavior. During team meetings, he would interrupt me with helpful corrections. Not always accurate, but delivered with an air of superiority. He'd steer conversations away from my successes and toward his own achievements, ensuring the spotlight never lingered on me for too long. It was as if an invisible barrier was being erected between me and the opportunities I thought were mine to grasp. Doubt started to creep in, slow and insidious. Was it just workplace politics? Or was there something darker at play? I found myself second-guessing every interaction, every piece of advice, every glance. Yet, the mentor I'd come to rely on was still there, his smile unwavering, his words still laced with encouragement. Even as I felt more isolated than ever, the cracks were small but unmistakable now, and with every one, my excitement dimmed just a little more. The atmosphere at work began to change in ways I couldn't ignore. What started as small, awkward silences in the break room grew into cold shoulders and hushed conversations just out of earshot. The colleagues who once smiled warmly now glanced at me with thinly veiled suspicion, their friendly greetings replaced by curt nods or silence. Rumors started swirling. Subtle, poisonous whispers about my reliability and professionalism. I caught fragments in the elevator, overheard snatches by the water cooler. Can you trust her with the new project? He's been making careless mistakes lately. I'm not sure if he's cut out for this level. Each whispered doubt felt like a knife twisting inside my chest. I tried to brush it off, but it was impossible to ignore the way people looked at me differently. Meetings where I once held space now felt cramped and hostile. Invitations to informal gatherings dried up overnight. The company, which had felt like a promising community, suddenly seemed like a labyrinth of silent enemies. Through it all, my mentor remained outwardly supportive. He offered reassuring smiles and encouraging words during our one-on-one check-ins, always reminding me to stay focused and not to pay attention to office gossip. But behind closed doors, his stance was less clear. I noticed how he would exchange knowing glances with others, his encouragement sometimes carrying an edge that made me uneasy, a subtle reminder of who really held the power. I wanted to believe he was my protector, but the growing distance between me and the rest of the team planted a seed of doubt that quietly grew. Had he been the source of these whispers all along, or was I just imagining things, letting paranoia cloud my judgment? The warmth of my mentor's early guidance was now overshadowed by an unsettling chill. The walls were closing in, and the friendly office had morphed into a battlefield where trust was a rare and fragile commodity. The moment of truth came like a thunderclap on an otherwise ordinary afternoon. I had always trusted my instincts, but never dared to fully confront the gnawing suspicion that my mentor, the man I had idolized, was behind the creeping darkness swallowing my career. Until now. It started with a quiet confession from one of my closest friends at work, someone I thought was neutral in office politics. She handed me a small folder, her hands trembling ever so slightly. I didn't want to believe it either, she whispered, eyes darting nervously around the empty hallway. But look at this. Inside were emails and internal memos, hidden messages revealing a pattern so blatant it shook me to my core. My mentor had been quietly feeding confidential information about my projects to my rivals, undermining my progress step by step. Each delay, each dismissed proposal, every backhanded comment at meetings, it was all orchestrated by the man I trusted most. Betrayal wasn't the right word. This was a calculated, deliberate act of sabotage, executed with cold precision. I felt my world collapse, a raw mixture of anger and heartbreak flooding through me. How could he, someone who had promised to help me rise, be the architect of my downfall? The same person who had offered fatherly advice, who had shared laughs over late-night coffees, was the one cutting the strings beneath my feet. I confronted him quietly, hoping for an explanation, for some shred of remorse, but he looked at me with a calm, chilling smile, as if I were the one who had betrayed him. "You should have known," he said softly. "This is business, not friendship." The revelation shattered not only my career trajectory, but the very foundation of trust I had built around him. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just professional betrayal, it was personal. The shock of betrayal left me reeling, but I refused to let it break me. Gathering my courage, I confronted my mentor directly, expecting anger, denial, or at least a shred of remorse. Instead, I was met with a cold, calculating gaze that seemed to pierce right through me. "You're imagining things," he said smoothly, his voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe you're just stressed. Don't let paranoia cloud your judgment." His words were like a twisted knife, designed not only to dismiss my claims but to make me question my own sanity. Suddenly, I was the one on trial, the accused rather than the victim. Whispers of unstable and unprofessional began to follow me, carefully seated by someone with influence. In meetings, he would subtly undermine me, cutting off my ideas with patronizing corrections, or steering conversations away from my contributions. When I tried to speak up, colleagues would avoid eye contact or quickly change the subject. The invisible barrier between me and the rest of the company grew thicker each day. I was becoming isolated, trapped in a web woven by my former mentor. It was clear he had tightened his grip on the company's internal politics, pulling strings behind the scenes to keep me sidelined and powerless. Each attempt to rally support was met with cold indifference or polite dismissal. I realized then that I was fighting an enemy who didn't show his face openly, a master manipulator who wielded influence like a weapon, cloaked in a veneer of mentorship and trust. I felt the weight of loneliness crushing down on me. No allies, no clear path forward, just a relentless, invisible force working to dismantle everything I'd built. But beneath the surface, a flicker of defiance ignited. I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. The walls were closing in, and the air felt heavy with silent judgment. My career, once soaring with promise, was now crumbling beneath the weight of betrayal and manipulation. Each day felt like a battle against an unseen adversary who had turned the entire company against me. Yet surrender was not an option. With no one left to trust and no official recourse, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. Quietly, I began to dig carefully, methodically into the past of the men who had once been my mentor, my guide, my trusted ally. Late nights became my new normal, scrolling through public records, old news articles, and social media profiles, searching for any hint of a weakness, a scandal, anything that could tip the scales back in my favor. Every shred of information became a potential weapon. Every vague lit a glimmer of hope. The meeting was set in a dimly lit cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The stranger was an older woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. Her words came slowly, but carried the I reached out to a few discreet contacts, former employees, industry insiders, people who might have seen another side of him. Their stories painted a picture far different from the polished image he projected. Whispers of ruthless ambition, unethical deals, and a trail of broken careers left in his wake. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this was no ordinary rivalry. This was a man who had built his success on the ruins of others, and I was just the latest casualty in his calculated ascent. But gathering evidence was only the first step. I needed a plan, a way to turn the tables without exposing myself too soon. Every move had to be precise, every step cloaked in secrecy. One wrong slip, and I risked not just my career, but my reputation and sanity. Despite the fear gnawing at the edges of my resolve, I felt a fierce determination burning brighter than ever. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming my future and exposing the darkness hiding behind that mentor's smile. Just when I thought I had uncovered all I could about my mentor's hidden past, an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows, a person whose presence sent a chill down my spine and promised to change everything. It happened late one evening, when a cryptic message appeared in my inbox. A name I had never heard before, along with a time and place to meet. My heart pounded as I debated whether to trust this stranger, but desperation outweighed caution. I needed answers, no matter the risk. Weight of years spent watching my mentor's rise, and the secrets he had tried desperately to bury. She revealed a dark history, hidden alliances, ruthless betrayals, and a scandal involving embezzlement that had been quietly swept under the rug years ago. According to her, my mentor had used that scandal as a stepping stone, manipulating and destroying anyone who stood in his way. What shocked me most was the implication that some of the company's current power players were connected to this past. Their loyalties tied to the very secrets my mentor sought to keep hidden. Her information was a double-edged sword, powerful, but dangerous. With this knowledge, I held the key to dismantling my mentor's carefully constructed empire. But wielding it meant stepping deeper into a world of shadows where trust was scarce and betrayal lurked behind every corner. I left that cafe with a heavy heart and a mind racing with possibilities. The game had changed, and now the stakes were higher than ever. The moment I stepped back into the office after that clandestine meeting, everything felt different, charged with a new energy that was equal parts fear and determination. Armed with the secrets from the shadows, I was no longer a helpless pawn, but a player in a deadly game of power and deception. Every conversation became a careful dance. I watched my mentor with a hawk's eyes, studying his mannerisms, his alliances, and the subtle signals he sent across the room. It was clear he sensed a shift, that the invisible walls he had built around me were beginning to crack. I started forging alliances of my own, quietly reaching out to colleagues who had been sidelined or wronged, people who had grievances that could be harnessed. Trust was scarce, but necessity forced unexpected partnerships. Together, we began to unravel the threads of the mentor's influence, exposing the cracks in his carefully polished facade. The office became a battleground of whispers and glances, with double crosses lurking at every turn. Every step I took was met with a counter. Every plan met with disruption. Meetings were ambushed by subtle sabotage. Emails disappeared or were altered, and trusted allies suddenly turned cold. Yet amidst the chaos, a strategic mind began to take shape. I learned to anticipate his moves, to set traps where he least expected them, and to turn his own tactics against him. But this battle of wits came with a price. The stress gnawed at me relentlessly. Sleep was elusive, and every day felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. Still, with every small victory, my confidence grew. The mentor who once seemed untouchable was beginning to show cracks, and I was ready to exploit them. The day of reckoning arrived like a storm breaking over a calm sea. The boardroom was filled with heavy anticipation. Executives in tailored suits exchanged guarded glances, their eyes flickering between me and my mentor. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest, but there was no turning back now. I stood up, heart pounding but voice steady, and laid out the evidence I had painstakingly gathered: emails, witness testimonies, financial discrepancies, every thread wove together a damning tapestry of deceit. I exposed how my mentor had orchestrated my downfall, sabotaging my projects, leaking secrets to rivals, and manipulating company politics to keep me sidelined. Gasps echoed around the room, disbelief mingling with shock. My mentor's calm facade cracked for the first time, a flicker of anger flashing across his eyes. But before I could sever the moment, he retaliated with a devastating blow of his own, a secret so explosive it threatened to shatter everything I had worked for. With a sly smile, he revealed confidential information about my past, mistakes I had made, moments I had tried to forget, weaponizing them in front of everyone to discredit me. The room fell into a stunned silence as whispers began to ripple through the crowd. It was a brutal counterattack, and for a moment I faltered under the weight of the unexpected betrayal. The battle lines had shifted, and I was no longer just fighting to expose him. I was fighting to protect my own name and future. But even in the face of this devastating revelation, I refused to back down. The truth was on my side, and deep inside, I knew this war was far from over. Just as the dust seemed to settle after the explosive boardroom showdown, I thought I could finally breathe again. But fate had one last cruel trick waiting in the shadows. In the days following the meeting, as whispers continued to swirl and alliances shifted like sand beneath my feet, a shocking revelation surfaced, one that no one saw coming, least of all me. Documents I had believed were the key to exposing my mentor's deceit were doctored, planted by an even more elusive force within the company. A hidden puppet master had been pulling strings behind both our backs, a senior executive, whose ambition far exceeded anything I had imagined. This shadow player wasn't just an observer. They had orchestrated much of the conflict, pitting mentor against protege in a deadly game to consolidate their own power. My mentor, as ruthless as he was, had been a pawn in a larger, more sinister plan. The final betrayal cut deeper than any before. Now, I stood at the center of a conspiracy far bigger than workplace rivalry, a tangled web of manipulation, secrets, and ambition that threatened to consume us all. The story I thought I knew was just the surface. Beneath it lay darker currents, waiting to drag us down. With this ultimate twist unveiled, I realized the battle wasn't over, it had only just begun. As the dust settled and the truth unfolded, I stood alone, amid the ruins of trust and ambition. The battles had been brutal, the betrayals devastating, but I had survived. I had fought not just for my career, but for my dignity, my voice, and my truth. The company would never be the same, and neither would I. Though the scars run deep, they shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, more cautious, yet still fiercely determined. I knew the road ahead would be long, filled with new challenges and unseen enemies. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. Ready to rebuild, to reclaim my place not just in the office, but in my own story. This was not the end, but a new beginning. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more real-life stories of liberation and justice.